Imagine losing your job, your hard-earned reputation, and your life savings in a single catastrophic afternoon, and feeling absolutely nothing but profound, unshakable peace.
Right.
Not shock, not psychological denial, just pure, unobstructed peace.
Sounds impossible, but yeah.
It does. But today, we are looking at a text that claims this isn't just some theoretical possibility, it is actually your natural state. Ashtavakra now reveals liberation in life, the freedom that is not postponed to death or another world, but lived here and now in the midst of existence.
Exactly.
If you enjoy unpacking these massive paradigm-shifting ideas with us, please make sure to subscribe, like, and share your reflections in the comments below. We really love reading your thoughts.
We absolutely do.
So, welcome to today's deep dive into the Ashtavakra Samhita, which is widely known as the Ashtavakra Gita. Our mission today is to explore the incredibly potent teachings leading up to Chapter 20. And the core theme here is, well, liberation in life.
Yeah, and that's a huge distinction.
Right. We are looking at a framework that takes the concept of total freedom and just drags it down from the misty Himalayan mountaintops, placing it right in the middle of your morning commute, your stressful meetings, and your everyday existence.
That grounded application is really what makes Ashtavakra so unique. To grasp his framework, we have to establish his baseline premise first, which is that the self is ever free.
Ever free.
Yeah, it always has been and it always will be.
Yeah.
When we talk about realization in this context, it is critical to understand that it does not mean escaping the physical world.
Oh, for sure.
It doesn't mean dissolving your physical form into some ethereal nothingness while you are still breathing. Liberation means living in absolute unshakable freedom while remaining fully embodied.
Fully embodied, right in the thick of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is about abiding in pure awareness right in the epicenter of the chaos. You don't retreat from the world to find peace. You realize the peace that exists beneath the noise of the world.
I mean, that is a massive paradigm shift right out of the gate. For anyone listening to this, whether you are dealing with a packed train car, or scrubbing dishes, or just trying to find 5 minutes of quiet with a cup of coffee, this implies that true freedom is available right at your current coordinates.
Right where you are.
You don't need a different zip code to break out of bondage. But before we get to the mechanics of this liberation, we need to look at what we are actually breaking free from. We have to look at Ashtavakra's definition of bondage.
Right. Chapter
Yes. In Chapter 8, the text lays it out so clearly. It says, "It is bondage when the mind desires or grieves at anything, rejects or accepts anything, feels happy or angry at anything."
Which covers basically the entire human experience, right?
Pretty much. And following that, the text asserts that the real you is pure consciousness. You are the unaffected witness of the phenomenal world. The ego is just consciousness that has been limited and distorted by the mind.
Yeah.
And our sources give a really compelling visual for this. It states it is as light is distorted by a prism.
The prism mechanism is honestly the perfect way to understand this. Consider pure white light. It contains everything, it is unified, and it is whole.
Okay, pure light.
But when that light passes through the angular glass of a prism, which represents the mind, it refracts. It scatters into a spectrum of isolated, fragmented colors.
Oh, wow.
Right? Suddenly you have a red band here, a blue band there. Pure consciousness hits the mind, and it scatters into these fragmented thoughts like, I want this, or I hate that, or I am succeeding, I am failing.
So the light gets all chopped up.
Exactly. The mechanism of bondage is our absolute preoccupation with these scattered colors. We identify with the refracted light rather than the source light.
We think we are the red band.
Yeah. We look at the red band of anger or the yellow band of desire and say, that is me, that is who I am. And this identification creates a heavy friction with the objective world, which leads to a constant conflict of interests.
So it is essentially a problem of mistaken identity.
100%.
It reminds me of putting on a virtual reality headset. You boot up a game, you drop into a digital world, and suddenly a digital monster swings a club at your digital avatar.
And you actually flinch.
You literally flinch. Your physical heart rate actually spikes. Your palms sweat. Your body is pumping out stress hormones because for that split second, you have identified completely with the avatar.
That's a great analogy.
The headset is the mind refracting your awareness into this limited digital body. And Ashtavakra is basically saying, take off the headset, or at least, recognize that you were wearing one.
Right, just recognize it.
Because when we identify with the avatar, we create these fictitious barriers between ourselves and the rest of the world. And our sources point out that this is the root of feud, jealousy, revenge, and, well, moral depravity.
The VR analogy is great because it highlights the physiological reality of the illusion. The game isn't real, but the sweat on your palms certainly is.
Yeah, it feels incredibly real.
And this is where Ashtavakra cuts right through the knot. He doesn't offer like a 12-step program to slowly upgrade your avatar. He just says, if one considers oneself free, one is free indeed.
Wait, just like that?
Just like that. Bondage is merely the persistent recurring thought that we are bound. The moment you recognize the headset for what it is, the binding thought loses its structural integrity.
It falls apart.
Exactly. If you shift your locus of identity back to the eternally free self, the mechanism that produces the suffering simply stops working.
Okay, the text provides a really striking metaphor for this exact moment of realization. Ashtavakra says, with the calming of the wind of the mind in the infinite ocean of myself, the arc of the universe of Jiva, the traitor, unfortunately meets destruction.
That's a heavy sentence.
It is. Let's dissect the components of that based on the commentary in our sources because there is just a lot packed in there.
Let's do it.
So the Jiva, which is the individual soul or the embodied self, is compared to a traitor. Right. And the traitor's commerce, the buying and selling, represents karma. So our actions and the consequences of those actions.
The hustle, basically.
Exactly, the hustle. The good and bad fruits of our lives are the profit and loss margins. And the entire objective world is the merchant ship carrying all this cargo.
Right.
The text asserts that when the wind of the mind finally calms down, this entire frantic trading enterprise, this whole ship of gaining and losing, just vanishes into the infinite ocean of the self.
It is a devastatingly complete metaphor. I mean, the trader is utterly obsessed with the ledger. Every interaction in the world is measured as a gain or a loss to the ego.
Like, did I win that argument? Profit.
That's someone criticized my work? Loss. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the wind of the mind is what keeps the ship moving across the water, driving it from port to port in search of more profit.
Always needing more.
Always. But what happens when the wind drops? The obsessive movement stops. The trader looks over the edge of the ship and sees the infinite ocean. The realization here is that the trader, the ship, and the cargo were all just temporary manifestations on the surface of something bottomless.
Okay, let's unpack this practically, though. Because if we are already an infinite ocean, why does it feel so incredibly real when our little merchant ship hits a storm?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because it is easy to say, I am the ocean when the water is calm and the profits are up. But let's look at the biology of a crisis.
Yeah.
If the bank is foreclosing on my house, or heaven forbid, a loved one is severely ill, my ship is taking on heavy water. The stress is a physiological reality. Cortisol is flooding my system. My heart is racing.
It's physical.
Completely physical. How does an ancient text deal with the very real biological mechanics of human suffering? We can't just pretend the storm isn't happening, can we?
Well, no, and that is the critical distinction we have to make. Pretending is actually a function of the ego.
Oh.
Yeah, it is a psychological defense mechanism where the mind tries to suppress or deny reality to protect the avatar. Ashtavakra's framework does not involve denial. It involves a radical shift in perspective regarding where the storm is occurring.
Okay, where is it occurring?
The text recognizes that the biological storm is indeed happening, but it is happening in the ocean. The ocean itself isn't damaged or diminished or threatened by the storm.
So the cortisol spike, the racing heart, that is just the storm on the surface.
Precisely. The biological fear, which is just the sympathetic nervous system reacting to a threat, is a totally natural mechanism. But the psychological suffering is the mind's added narrative.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So the body releases cortisol because of a perceived threat. That is layer one. Layer two is the mind stepping in and screaming, I am a failure, my life is ruined, I will never recover from this.
Layer two is where the torture is.
Exactly. The Jiva, the traitor, panics because he thinks he is the ship. He thinks if the ship sinks, he ceases to exist. Ashtavakra removes that second layer of psychological narrative entirely.
The liberated one realizes they are the ocean.
Yes. They watch the biological storm happen, they feel the heart racing, they notice the sensation of fear in the chest, they might even watch the ship splinter and sink. But they observe it from a place of vast spaciousness. Knowing their true nature as the witness remains completely untouched by the wreckage.
They separate the physical sensation from their core identity.
That's it.
Our sources literally state, you are neither earth, nor water, nor fire, nor air, nor ether. You are the witness of all these.
Oh, witness.
And when you stop feeding the biological reaction with the psychological narrative of doom, The physiological storm actually processes out of your system much faster, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Without the wind of the mind constantly blowing on the embers of anxiety, the physical reaction completes its cycle and dissipates.
Just burns out.
Yeah. You still deal with the foreclosure or the crisis,
Yeah.
but you deal with it with clear eyes and a steady hand, rather than from a place of existential terror.
So if you aren't the ship, how do you walk through the rain without getting wet? This brings us to a really fascinating portion of the text that describes how this state is practically lived out day to day.
The Jivanmukta.
Exactly. We are looking at a concept the text calls the Jivanmukta, which means the one who is liberated while living. And Ashtavakra makes a declaration that sounds almost alien at first glance.
It does.
He says this person is completely untouched by pleasure and pain. According to the text, the liberated one neither slanders nor praises, neither rejoices nor is angry, neither gives nor takes. They are described as being totally free from attachment to all objects.
Which, to a modern mind constantly bombarded by stimuli, that description sounds incredibly stark.
It really does.
How does a human being operate without the push and pull of pleasure and pain?
Yeah.
But the text gives us the exact mechanism.
What does it say?
It states, "He who has given up worldly attachment from his mind, to him any experience coming as a matter of course does not cause either pleasure or pain."
Coming as a matter of course.
That's the operative phrase. The Jivanmukta does not forcefully avoid pain, nor do they frantically chase after pleasure. When either phenomenon arrives at their doorstep, they experience it fully, but without the mental friction of resistance or grasping.
So when the text says it doesn't cause them pleasure or pain, it means it doesn't cause them psychological turbulence.
Exactly.
If a liberated person eats a delicious meal, it doesn't just taste like cardboard. They taste the spices.
Right, they enjoy it.
But they don't immediately start thinking, oh, I need to eat this again tomorrow, or I should have ordered a larger portion. They don't grasp at the pleasant sensation.
The sensory input registers, but the ego doesn't claim it. The text explains that the liberated person's actions pertain only to life.
Meaning what, exactly?
This means they perform the actions necessary for simple subsistence and functioning in the world. They eat when the body requires fuel. They sleep when the body requires rest. But they possess no grand, ego-driven ambitions to conquer the world or accumulate excess.
Just living simply.
Yeah. The commentary in the source material puts it beautifully. It says, "Let the body last to the end of the cycle, the kalpa, or let it drop today." To the pure intelligence, there is no increase or decrease.
That level of detachment is hard to conceptualize, frankly.
It is.
But to bridge the gap, the sources provide a couple of very vivid analogies. The first is the analogy of space and a jar. Ashtavakra says, "Boundless as space am I. The phenomenal world is like a jar."
I love this one.
It's brilliant. Let's look at the physics of that. You take clay, you mold it, you fire it in a kiln, and you create a jar. The space inside that clay jar is identical to the infinite space outside of it.
There's no difference.
None at all. The space didn't change its fundamental nature just because a clay wall was built around it. And if you drop the jar on the floor and it shatters, the space inside isn't broken, it wasn't bruised, it was never truly contained in the first place.
It is such a brilliant spatial representation of the jiva and the self. The body, the personality, the specific circumstances of your life, these are just the clay walls of the jar.
The fragile clay.
Right. And we spend all our energy trying to polish the clay, paint it, protect it from cracking. But the consciousness inside, the awareness looking out through your eyes, is the unbroken space.
So liberating.
When the jar inevitably breaks, whether through loss, aging, or death, the space simply remains what it always was, which is boundless.
There's another analogy about sugar that applies here perfectly too. The text says, "Just as sugar generated in sugarcane juice is wholly pervaded by it, even so the universe produced in me is permeated by me through and through."
It's all the same sweetness.
Exactly. The sweetness isn't localized to just one fibrous section of the cane. The sweetness is the underlying essence of the entire plant. It permeates every single drop.
Right.
But wait, I have to push back on something here. When we hear all of this, you know, that the liberated person neither rejoices nor is angry, that they neither give nor take, it paints a picture of a very cold, almost robotic existence.
Yeah, a lot of people read it that way.
It sounds like someone who has just given up on life. But then, right next to those descriptions, the text states the liberated person goes about happily and enjoys being alone.
Yes.
So how do we reconcile this? It clearly isn't a state of depressive apathy.
No. It is the exact opposite of apathy. But we often confuse the two because our modern culture equates caring With worry,
Oh, that's a great point.
apathy is actually a state of severe mental exhaustion. It is a heaviness that occurs when the mind has chased desires for so long and faced so much frustration that it simply shuts down to protect itself.
It just goes numb.
Apathy is the inability to feel. But Ashtavakra is pointing to something entirely different, a profound, unshakable serenity born from absolute clarity. The liberated person lives, as the text specifically enumerates, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and eating. But they do so with a mind that is fully absorbed and contented.
So they are actually experiencing the world more vividly than we are.
Significantly more vividly. What drains our joy and dulls our senses isn't the world itself. It is the conflict of thought layered over the world.
The narrative again.
Always the narrative. It is the constant internal monologue of judging, comparing, calculating, and wishing the present moment was somehow different than it is.
Yeah, always wanting to be somewhere else.
Imagine taking a walk in a beautiful forest. An average mind is thinking about an email from the boss, worrying about a bill, or trying to take the perfect photo for social media.
Guilty as charged.
We all are. The cognitive load is immense. A massive percentage of brain power is diverted away from the present reality.
The jar is filled with noise, so you can't see the space.
Exactly. When that internal conflict ceases, 100% of your cognitive bandwidth is freed up to simply exist. You taste the food without the mental commentary about calories or the fear of running out.
Wow.
You see the forest without trying to capture it. You are entirely frictionlessly present. And this unhindered presence feels incredibly light. That is why the text says they go about happily.
It isn't a manic, adrenaline-fueled happiness.
No, it is the quiet joy of not being in opposition to reality.
And the text notes, they enjoy being alone because they realize they are the whole universe. The sugar permeates everything. There is nothing else but them.
You can't be lonely if you are everything.
Exactly. They are never truly isolated because the boundaries of the self have expanded to include everything. This leads directly into a very reassuring aspect of the teaching.
A crucial part, yes.
The text provides a powerful assurance that life itself, the very act of engaging with the world, is not the cause of bondage. The problem isn't the world, it is how we are looking at it.
Right.
Ashtavakra explicitly states that liberation does not require running away to a cave in the mountains. He says, a stage of life or no stage of life, meditation, renunciation of the objects of the mind, finding them causing distractions to me, thus verily do I abide.
Ashtavakra is addressing a very common spiritual trap right there.
Yeah.
People often think that to be free, they must drastically change their external circumstances.
I have to quit everything.
Yeah, they think if I quit my stressful job, sell my possessions, and move to a monastery, I will find peace. But Ashtavakra categorizes the effort of renunciation as just another distraction.
It's just more work for the ego.
Precisely. Whether you are a student, a householder managing a family, or a wandering monk, these are merely external stages. If you try to force renunciation, you are still obsessed with the objects.
It is like trying to diet by sitting in a bakery and intensely focusing on not eating the donuts.
That is a perfect way to put it.
You are still completely tethered to the donuts. Your whole reality is defined by your relationship to the pastry, even if that relationship is rejection.
The mechanism of forced renunciation relies entirely on the ego. It is the ego saying, look how spiritual I am, look at all the things I am disciplined enough not to do.
Spiritual materialism.
Exactly. Ashtavakra dismantles this spiritual materialism. The text declares, be he a mendicant or a king, he excels who is unattached. The sage does nothing, even if he may be acting in the eyes of the world.
So how does that work in practice? How does someone act in the world while inwardly doing nothing? Let's take the example of a CEO running a massive competitive company. Can a CEO be a Jivanmukta?
Absolutely. And it actually provides a massive competitive advantage.
Really? How so?
Well, when we usually act with attachment to the outcome. I must close this deal, or my identity as a successful person is ruined.
So the stakes are deeply personal.
Very personal. This attachment creates anxiety, and anxiety severely degrades performance. It narrows your focus, triggers the fight or flight response, and impairs complex decision-making.
Right.
But the liberated CEO takes the actions necessary to run the company. They analyze data, they negotiate, they lead meetings, but they are completely unattached to the ultimate outcome.
Because they don't derive their sense of self from the profit margins.
Correct. By detaching from the outcome, they free up all their cognitive energy to focus purely on the execution of the present task.
They must be incredibly efficient.
Extremely efficient. Because they aren't wasting energy, fearing failure or fantasizing about success. They act as an instrument of the situation, without the personal narrative of, I am doing this grand thing, carrying the heavy, exhausting weight of the action.
We have to bring in the incredible historical and narrative context of the text itself here because it perfectly illustrates your point about the CEO.
Well, the backstory is essential.
Really is. Who is actually having this conversation in the source material? It is King Janaka and the sage Ashtavakra. Janaka is not a monk living on alms in a forest. He is a ruling monarch.
A very busy guy.
Right. He has immense wealth, immense political power, complex administrative duties, and the absolute fate of a kingdom on his shoulders. He probably has 1,000 people demanding decisions from him every single day.
At least.
Yet it is this busy, powerful king who is deemed ready to receive the ultimate teachings on liberation.
The choice of King Janaka as the disciple is not an accident. It is a deliberate structural element of the teaching. It proves that the external environment is completely irrelevant to the internal realization.
And then look at the teacher. Ashtavakra's name literally translates to eight-curved.
Yes.
He was born severely physically deformed in 8 places due to a mythological curse while he was still in the womb. But the lore tells us that at age 12, this physically deformed boy walked into the opulent court of King Janaka and completely defeated the kingdom's greatest, most arrogant scholar in a philosophical debate.
Incredible story.
The context here is just vital. The king, who has every conceivable physical and material advantage, needs the profound wisdom of a physically deformed boy who essentially has nothing. In the realm of the self, the physical circumstances are entirely negated.
Entirely.
True freedom is 100% independent of the shape of your body, the size of your bank account, or your worldly roles.
It is the ultimate leveling of the human experience. The king and the sage meet in the space of pure awareness, where there is no crown and no deformity.
Just
the space. For the modern individual, the application of this is incredibly potent. It means that the environment you are currently in, no matter how stressful or mundane or complicated it seems, is the exact environment in which you can wake up.
That is so uplifting.
Liberation is an inner posture of witnessing. As the text states, the key is acting in conformity with the thought. This is done by the body, and not by me, the pure self.
So if you are typing an email to an angry client, the fingers are typing. The brain is accessing its vocabulary to formulate professional words. But the witness is simply watching the typing happen.
Unbothered.
Unbothered. The witness isn't offended by the client. The witness is completely at peace. You don't have to put your life on hold to become spiritual.
No waiting required.
You don't have to wait for the weekend, or wait until you finally retire, or wait until the kids are out of the house. Spirituality is in the seeing, not in the changing of the scenery.
It really removes all excuses. The ego loves to say, oh, I will find peace when things calm down. Ashtavakra says peace is the backdrop of the chaos right now. You are already in the perfect place to realize your freedom, because freedom is the foundational architecture of your consciousness.
And just when you think you understand that architecture, just when you think you have a solid handle on how to be a Jivanmukta and how to practice unattached action, Ashtavakra pulls the rug out from under you.
I think it really does.
We finally arrive at chapter 20, which is the absolute summit of the text. This is the pinnacle of non-dual philosophy. Ashtavakra takes all the concepts, all the metaphors, all the practices he just spent 19 chapters building, and he essentially sets them on fire in front of the disciple.
Burns it all down.
He declares, ever devoid of the sense of duality, for me where is scripture, where is self-knowledge, where is mind not reflecting objects, where is contentment, or where is desirelessness?
The radical nature of chapter 20 cannot be overstated. Throughout the dialogue, Ashtavakra has been constructing a very sturdy boat to help King Janaka cross the turbulent river of ignorance.
He gave him all the tools.
Right. He's given him conceptual tools, like the instruction to be unattached, the framework to act without ego, the practice to witness the mind. But upon reaching the other shore, the shore of absolute, uncompromising non-duality, Ashtavakra insists that the boat must be burned.
You can't take it with you.
If you carry the boat on your back after crossing the river, the boat just becomes a new, heavier burden.
It is an incredible irony. We are doing a deep dive into a revered scripture, exploring its depths, and the climax of the scripture is the author asking, where is scripture?
Yeah.
He states in the commentary that even the idea of liberation is a serious limitation to the seeker of wisdom, as it screens from him the true nature of the self.
Right.
I want to pause on that because it sounds counterintuitive to everything we've talked about. How does the desire for liberation actually prevent liberation?
We have to look at the psychological mechanics of seeking. The act of seeking inherently relies on a timeline.
Like past, present, future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates a paradigm of not here but there and not now but later. If you are seeking liberation, you are actively affirming the premise that you are currently bound.
Oh, wow.
You are validating the illusion. The ego sneaks in through the back door. It couldn't find satisfaction in seeking worldly wealth, so it pivoted to seeking spiritual wealth.
It just changed costumes.
But the structure of the ego remained perfectly intact. The identity has just shifted from, I am a struggling trader, to I am a dedicated spiritual seeker.
The avatar just put on a monk's robe, but you are still wearing the VR headset.
Precisely. The identity of the seeker is the final illusion that must be dropped. Because as long as there is a seeker, there is a distance between you and the truth.
And Ashtavakra says there is no distance.
Ashtavakra collapses that distance entirely. The text states with absolute finality, there is no preparation, no fruition in the life of a seeker, but only this understanding.
No preparation, no fruition. That is a terrifying concept for the human mind.
It panics the ego.
The ego loves a project. It loves a 10-step plan. It loves tracking progress. It loves the idea of eventually graduating. It hates being unemployed.
Yeah, it needs a job.
If there is no preparation required and no future fruition to wait for, what is left for us to do? Ashtavakra asks this profound question. To the sage who perceives the self as imperishable and sorrowless, what is knowledge, what is the universe, or what are the feelings of, I am the body and the body is mine?
When you truly recognize that you are the infinite space, the space that was never broken when the jar shattered, the concepts of acquiring knowledge become nonsensical.
Right.
You don't need a map to find a place you have never left. The text describes the true self as effortless, immutable, and spotless. It is neither far away nor is it attained because you finally overcame your limitations.
So we don't achieve this state through sheer force of will.
No.
We don't earn it by logging enough meditation hours or accumulating enough good karma points. We simply rest in the truth of what is already functioning.
We just drop it.
We drop the exhausting lifelong project of trying to become something better. We realize that the entity doing the seeking is actually the entity we have been looking for. The seeker is the sought.
The final duality to be erased is the distinction between the one who is bound and the one who is free. In the absolute reality described in Chapter 20, there is only the self.
Nothing else.
There is no individual person who needs to undergo a process of liberation. That is the ultimate revelation of freedom in life. It is not the triumphant achievement of a shiny new state of consciousness. It is the quiet, undeniable recognition that the state you are in, right this second, as a pure witness listening to these words, is already perfect, already complete, and already free.
It fundamentally changes how you view every struggle. From dissecting the illusion of bondage and the prism of the mind, to figuring out how to engage with the world without the friction of the ego, to realizing that the daily grind is the actual arena for freedom.
It's all right here.
And then finally, that breathtaking pivot where even the pursuit of freedom is revealed as just another thought dissolving into the infinite ocean. As we wrap up this deep dive, the core takeaway we want to leave you with is clear. Liberation is not an escape plan.
No, it's not.
It is freedom, lived here and now. It is the end of the conflict within your own mind, right in the middle of your perfectly ordinary life.
I want to leave you with a practical thought experiment to carry with you today. Think back to the analogy of the jar and the space.
Okay.
If you are indeed the boundless space that contains the entire universe, and the circumstances of your life are just the clay walls, what is one specific thing you are stressing over right now that suddenly seems like just a tiny, fragile jar?
That is a phenomenal question to use as a lens for the rest of the day. Notice the jar, but remember the space.
Beautifully said.
Thank you for joining us on this extensive exploration of the Ashtavakra Samhita. Again, please subscribe, like, and share your reflections on this living freedom in the comments below. What is your tiny jar today? Let us know.
We'd love to hear it.
And we highly suggest that you join us next time as we continue with Chapter 21 to explore the disciples' beautiful, spontaneous affirmation of this liberation in life. Until then, keep diving deep.